If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, do so now. And if you are subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. It seems that practically every day more people are notifying me that they have been mysteriously unsubscribed without their knowledge. Also, hit the bell icon. That's supposedly how you're supposed to be notified when new videos are released. And of course, give the video a like. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, it's no secret that black people in the United States are oversampled when it comes to consumption of entertainment. This is because black people are attempting to escape from their circumstances. Entertainment serves the purpose of escapism, a temporary reprieve from the real world, and black people are forever looking for ways to hide from reality, which explains why white supremacy still stands and black empowerment does not yet exist. But how do you get people to dial themselves in for this kind of denial of reality for the long haul? How do you make it where the people decide to hide their head in the sand long term? Well, you got to come up with a lie, but not just any lie. It has to be a seductive lie. It has to be a sophisticated lie, a lie that largely seems to mirror the reality that people are in, albeit with a unrealistic twist to it. You want something that makes it where the person being lied to will go along with the lie. White supremacy is nothing if not sophisticated. You do not have a system like this that endures for half a millennium by being stupid. As a case study, in just the last 6 months alone, we have been subjected to not one but two grotesquely blatant in-our-face examples of the white media trying to rewrite black history. Cassie Lemons, who clearly is on some sort of anti-black male jihad, she's allowing herself to be used as a stalking horse for the propaganda arm of white supremacy. She's been the person, the front negress, behind not one but two pieces of anti-black propaganda. First, Harriet, which should be called Not Harriet, and then Self-Made Woman, which is doubly ironic when you consider that you got this so-called black female director who waits on Netflix to give her a check to write some garbage, and she calls it Self-Made Woman when she's not practicing any sort of self-made anything. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, the white media is out to control image. The reason for this is simple. I use a phrase called image training quite a bit. And what is image training? It's based on a very simple principle. As human beings, we take in fully 80% or so of the data that our brains process in the form of images. We rarely listen to anything that's being said, and we almost never do any research through our other senses, including asking questions. We just take whatever we see at face value. So, since repetition is the mother of learning, and we learn mostly through what we see because we can't be bothered to utilize critical thinking, what happens is when you see a particular image or a particular trope over and over again, you're being programmed. Well, most of us anyway. And we have to be honest about that reality. Most of us, including a lot of you who are nodding your heads and going, that's right, them other Negroes over there, they're being programmed, not me. The black community would not be in the condition that it's in right now if most of us were not going for this okie doke. White supremacy has no problem allowing you to have plausible deniability of their brainwashing and indoctrination, because that's exactly how every long-term system of control is able to endure. The control has to be deniable. The ancient Romans understood that principle. A system that requires physical chains, that absolutely needs physical chains to be put on somebody in order to get them to toe the line and keep them subjugated, that's a system that can't stand because people can see the chains. They can see the person who put them on. They understand that they're under oppression. But when you have a system that denies that it's oppressive, that takes the chains off of you, and you have the chains woven into the social fabric itself and the political structure itself, now what's happening is the person being oppressed gets to deny the oppression. And by doing so, they become collaborators in their own oppression. And this is where a sophisticated form of media comes into play. You require a form of media that is smart, a form of media that is going to be seductive in the way that it gets its lies across to its intended victim. You know the old saying about life imitates art? It's attributed to Oscar Wilde, and it is true, but that saying didn't come from nowhere. It was a direct critique on the power of mass media. But art is not some anomalous thing, and mass media is anything but random. Under white supremacy, all media is propaganda. All of it. I've taught you that both the so-called entertainment and the so-called news that you watch are actually made to complement one another. They're not made to be separated, they play off of each other, and that's deliberate. By complement, I mean they're meant to work together. They mirror each other. They are both two halves of the exact same message. People are much more likely to watch something that's entertaining before they even consider watching something that's allegedly informative or educational. So the white media for centuries has used its entertainment as the primary vehicle to teach its anti-black racism. White media teaches societal roles, and the principal societal role being a racial hierarchy that must be adhered to. The TV shows and dramas and cartoons and comedy specials, they indoctrinate the society that black people are criminals or buffoons, or at the very best, the best that a black person can be is the best friend to some white person. In other words, a two-legged hound dog. And the white news shows justify this racial hierarchy by starting off with a black suspect leading the news. The crime blotter always starts off with a black person. Even if they're reporting on some black person who they reported on for the last 2 or 3 days, they'll go ahead and rerun that. Even if they have to report on some black person outside the city or even outside the state, they'll go ahead and do that. But as long as they maintain that absolute requisite, that's how you know that a program is at work here. It's not a matter of we're leading off with the latest crime. It's a matter of here's your reminder of who the black man is supposed to be. This is who the bad guys are. That's deliberate. Sure, there are a number of black people who send press releases to the white media and who otherwise are engaged in all manner of constructive and meritorious behavior for their own benefit, but the white media is not showing that. And the reason why is this is image training. They're also trying to indoctrinate the black community to understand if you're doing anything that's good, that's not going to be covered. Nobody's going to be broadcasting that. If you're doing something bad, that's what's going to lead the news. So if you're a black person, what possible hope do you have to get the media megaphone of white supremacy to at least stop it with the blatant anti-black racist programming? Well, the white media goes ahead and gives you an out on that when they go ahead and make their blatant racism deniable, because they'll give a pat on the head to a black person for being a good athlete so long as there's a white coach or a white sports franchise that your athletic prowess is benefiting, or for being useful to white supremacist institutions. They can do some insincere puff piece about some black politician or government appointee or perhaps some Negro at a university, because this reinforces that black people should aspire to prop up the trappings and institutions of white power. And it's not as if the white power who owns the media doesn't know all this. You think all those PhDs and think tanks and all those people who have spent decades running the media do not understand exactly what the power of all of this repetitive imagery is? Hell, they write books about it. That's the reason why whenever you have these movies that are about the Depression or what have you, it better be a gangster movie about a white man who's running around robbing people and taking what he wants. You better not be showing white people down and out. The dominant society makes it very clear that's the kind of imagery they're not interested in seeing, and they rebel against that. You're not going to be showing images of white people as just these hapless victims. You're not going to be showing white people as victims of circumstance or white people at the bottom of the barrel and there's nothing they can do. It's like, nah, you better not be trying to reinforce that. The appeal of the material the white media puts out isn't by accident. It's not incidental. It's calculated. They spend hundreds of millions per year to make it so. They use psychologists and sociologists and all manner of academic experts to help them craft the TV shows and movies that you watch to push certain psychological buttons. If you watch cartoons in particular, if you look at the credits, you'll see that on some of those cartoons, if not a few of them, you'll see there's some people with PhDs in their names who contributed to the making of those cartoons. They gear their material to appeal to us on the surface and subliminal levels. They deliberately structure the TV shows that they present to us in such a way that's meant to bypass our skepticism and critical thinking. That's why they use sex and special effects and other distractions. That's just a way for them to candy coat the poison. You're so busy paying attention to the whiz bang CGI, or you're paying attention to some actor's bare bottom or some full frontal nudity, or you're watching some pyrotechnic explosions going off and you're really not paying that much attention to what it is they're getting across. Sure, they're going ahead and getting their message across, but before you start dwelling on it too much, here comes the next action set piece. Oh, look at all the fancy camera movement. We've got 3D robots and aliens and such. Yeah, and you also got an image of Captain America in Wakanda. Here he is in a black man's kingdom, and you got a white boy out front. Just thought I'd say so because you damn sure ain't going to be seeing Black Panther in a Captain America movie front and center. And I say this as somebody who hasn't even watched this. I just watched the promotional material for it. And it's blatantly obvious that there's something wrong with it. But again, a lot of black folks will happily plunk down their $12 to see this stuff because as far as they're concerned, it's going to be an entertaining 2 hours. Yeah, entertaining. And indoctrinating. Now, as far as the psychological buttons, the subliminal buttons that the white media pushes when it comes to their entertainment, consider this. Most of the TV shows that you watch happen to be built along the structure of a family. You usually have a lead character who's going to be the stern father type figure, and then you've got a secondary character to him who is his subordinate, who basically says go easy on the kids, and then you got the rest of the supporting cast who are basically the children, if you will. The example that comes most readily to mind, but I'm sure that a lot of you, based on whatever your favorite TV show is, can think of it, say Star Trek. Star Trek's one that we all should be familiar with. If you had the Next Generation, you had Picard. He was the stern father-like figure. And then you had Riker, who was the fun-loving subordinate who was basically telling Picard, chill out, we're out here in space to have a good time. Basically, the point is like the mother on the show. See, even if you don't have a female as the secondary in command, even if it's not based on gender, it's based on what you respond to. That's the reason why with Voyager, you had a woman who was the captain of the ship, and you had a Hispanic who was her second in command. And yet what you had was Janeway was the strict father figure. And you had Chakotay who was saying, you ought to go easy on the kids. They understand exactly the structure that they're using. And by the way, that's not the only one. There's a number of structures, a number of templates that the white media uses to fashion their work in order to bypass your subliminals and make it where you're accepting it. It's resonating with you and you're not even sure why. Another one that comes to mind is the TV show True Blood. That was not based on the structure of a family. It was based on the structure of high school. You got the young girl who's basically the freshman in high school. You got the mean girls. You've got her black best friend. You got the love interest who's basically the star jock who doesn't have eyes for anyone except for her. You have the sheriff who is basically the school principal. He's stern but fair. That kind of thing. There's a number of templates that the white media uses as a means of getting a show to resonate with you. And here you are taking it in and you're wondering why it is that it has such appeal with you. They pay very highly to make sure that their shows do that. As I've always taught you, the white media, the men who run the white media, they don't see themselves as being in the business of entertainment. They see themselves as being in the business of mind control. And when you look at how it is that black people, who ought to be the main ones who are keeping that idiot box off, black folks are the main ones who oversample when it comes to watching TV. Oversampling means that we are disproportionately represented when it comes to TV viewership. So we're the main ones sitting here being TV heads. And then wondering where all of this manic, out of control dysfunction comes from. When you look into the abyss does indeed look into you. And while the public, particularly the Black community, bears responsibility for choosing to watch and to base their lives on these media lies, it's not entirely fair to say that they should bear all the blame. They didn't make up these lies in the first place. They did not come up with a media structure meant to push these lies on the public. White supremacy did that. The white media, the propaganda arm of white supremacy, did that. The TV programs and reality shows and all the other visual detritus the white media pumps out doesn't reflect what the public actually wants to see. The public didn't invent reality TV shows. The white media did. The public has no control over what the white media decides to present to them, so why does the public watch these shows to begin with? Entertainment plays on a natural human drive. It serves a mental need to downshift our brains for a given period of time. Now, if the entertainment is edifying and honors us and encourages us to pursue our empowerment, then it's good. It is worthy. But if the entertainment indoctrinates us to behave in ways that are detrimental to our interests, if it brainwashes us with a false, dangerous view of ourselves to pursue personal and group destruction, then it's not entertainment. It is blasphemous. And that being the case, you must identify it for what it is. It is wrong and must be abandoned. And Black people have to understand that because of the fact that so many of us have decided to make a lifestyle out of ingesting and consuming the very anti-Black propaganda that our enemies have built, even if you tried to make so-called entertainment that's meant to be in your own best interest, you have to be careful that you're not repeating of the very lies that you yourself have been indoctrinated with. I don't care how good the production values of a show are. I don't care if a Black person allegedly directed it. Every director works for whatever producer hired them. I don't care how well written it is or how good the acting is supposed to be. These elements are used to entice people to watch. It's a formula. The white media understands the rudiments of formulaic entertainment. There have to be so many minutes of explosions, so many minutes of palace intrigue, so many minutes of bare boobs and butts, so many minutes of CGI, so many minutes of violence. It's done to a formula. But it should never be forgotten that no less than Dr. John Henrik Clarke warned us, these shows are out there because someone wants them to be out there. One in particular that comes to mind is HBO's The Wire. Now, The Wire, regardless of what you may think about the acting or the subject matter or the idea that Black people are then as now so starved to just see a show that's got some Black faces out front, and white supremacy plays on that. They make it where any and all depictions of Black people are either going to be completely and thoroughly outrageously racist, or you're not going to be seeing anything at all, to the point where you basically will accept whatever garbage they put in front of you, and that's exactly what happened. But The Wire was never a ratings blockbuster. In fact, it always did poorly in the ratings. So why did HBO keep it around for 5 years? Because the honchos at HBO personally liked it. David Simon himself said that. This is a show that did real psychological violence to the image of Black people, particularly Black children, showing depictions of Black children dealing drugs. And then you wonder why it is that Freddie Gray gets murdered, and for some strange reason, the white media feels like they've got entree to go after his mother. You see how entertainment basically works hand in hand with the so-called white news. And David Simon himself used to work for a white newspaper, the Baltimore Sun, I believe. No, these are not coincidences at all. And since Black people didn't dream up these shows, didn't make them, didn't write them, and don't broadcast them, that means that white supremacy did. As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, if the only thing you present a man with is dirty water, he'll drink it if he's thirsty. Well, unfortunately, because of the fact that black people's image has largely had a war waged on it, not merely a war to denigrate that image, but also a war to make it where black people are seen as seldom as possible, we got a whole bunch of thirsty black folks out there. We need to be honest. When it comes to entertainment, some of us are absolutely parched. We will slurp up any old crap that white supremacy puts in front of us. Now, sure, people watch this garbage because as a group, people are prone to foolish behavior. That explains why they watch it, but it doesn't explain why this crap was put in front of them in the first place. Well, as the great television writer David Milch said, writers say all the time, that's what we're selling because that's what the people are buying. But the truth is, Milch said, that's what the people are buying because that's what we're selling. And he was absolutely right. Before we go on, I'm not excusing black people from using their brains. We know we're under oppression, though some of us, most of us, seem to be in denial about it. We complain about media all the time, yet practically few of us have actually stopped watching what we know to be mind rot put in front of us by our enemies. And of those who watch, none of us think about what it is that we're watching. As far as we're concerned, if it's entertainment, that means you turn your brain off. After all, isn't that the entire point of entertainment? No. The point of entertainment is to have a sustained, calculated slowdown. It's not to turn your brain off. The brain is always supposed to be on. You're not supposed to have an off switch, though some black folks seem to have found or invented one. Worse than that, they believe the lies that the white media puts in front of them, and they even try to live their lives by it. I'm not letting any black people off the hook for playing the fool to white media, but I'm also not letting the white supremacist media off the hook either. They have spent centuries refining their methods of social engineering and brainwashing. They literally have gotten it down to a science, and they know it. Make sure that black people are shown as criminals and thugs and ne'er-do-wells. And if they're not, well, make sure that it's clear this guy is the white person's sidekick. Make sure he's in the background of whatever image you have, and make sure that there's not many of them. We don't want too many images of black folks or they might start getting a little uppity. We want to make it where basically we don't show them at all, and it's clearly obvious to the viewer. We don't want black folks being seen unless we just feel like we have no other choice. Now, when you do that, what will happen is, inevitably, why you won't have to make any excuses for these denigrating images of black people. You won't have to make any excuses or explain away why it is that you marginalize black people, even in what's supposed to be entertainment. Black people themselves, so desirous and desperate to see an image of themselves that's something other than a thug, criminal, etc., they'll make up the excuses for you. They will offer lies for you. They'll cover for the white media. And that's exactly what's happened. You have black people justifying the white media's lies and indoctrination. And there's a reason for that. People have to be taught to be dysfunctional. People have to be taught to fight against their own best interests. This is the purpose the white media's so-called entertainment serves. It's poison in a candy coating. And somehow a lot of us have developed an appetite for this crap. Have you not noticed that even black people on their own, just out and about, if they've got their cell phone camera or any camera at all, and they do a video with themselves in it, they inevitably lapse into some sort of urban hip-hop patois where you think they're about to go into a rap video or something. And the reason for that is they've been indoctrinated that when a black person's on camera, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go into your performance. And the performance is whatever the white media has put in front of you the most frequently, which is usually some sort of rapper, singer, athlete, etc. This is how you program a people to stop thinking and acting for themselves. This is the worst kind of dysfunction. Human beings are creatures of habit. We are what we do. If we do nothing, then we are nothing. And if we do self-destructive behavior, we destroy ourselves. Understand, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So when people are made to do things that are against their interests, say they are made to serve their oppressors for an extended period of time, they have their natural order broken down and they are completely scrambled up and screwed up and rearranged along the lines that make it where their entire existence is devoted to being useful to other people, especially those who hate them. What's going to happen is proper habits of self-preservation and self-empowerment are going to be undermined and destroyed. And even after these people walk off the plantations, even without massa standing over them to directly enforce the dysfunction, a number of them will still continue in these self-destructive ways. And you're not going to be able to talk these guys out of it. And when you have a sophisticated propaganda organ like the white media that is glamorizing, propping up, and promoting these very ideas to people in the form of imagery, well, what you have is a self-reinforcing mechanism. Well, I don't have the patience or the luxury of reforming anyone who has volunteered to be a lost cause. And that brings me to black children. Black children need to be taught what is in their interests. The white media is certainly not going to do that. The black misleadership class isn't going to do that. These actors, athletes, and rappers and entertainers that so many of you oversample with your viewing of them, they're not going to teach you to do that. The home is supposed to be the primary classroom of the child. And what's being taught in the black home? Well, what's being taught in the black home is leave the children to their own devices. That means they're going to be open prey for the white media's indoctrination. First of all, every black child must be taught that as black people, they have interests. And that these interests must be protected because they live in a world that has organized itself to attack them. They live in a world that has put in place a structure meant to grind them into the dust. That they have interests that are separate and distinct and unique from the dominant society that they happen to live under. They need to be taught that your interests are not the same as the white supremacists. Your interests are not the same as the dominant society. They must be taught the reality that they live under oppression and that this oppression must be ended. The world happens to be twisted and perverted by white supremacy. They have a right and a duty to set things to rights. The current system of white supremacy is evil and must be crushed. It cannot be fixed, it cannot be reformed, it cannot be improved, and it damn sure can't be compromised with. Every black child is supposed to be taught that. I posted on Twitter yesterday that there are 3 things, and clearly there's more than 3, but there are 3 things that black people are supposed to be teaching black children that they apparently can't be bothered to teach. First of all, black children need to be taught as soon as this child can understand your words. It needs to be taught. You have no friends. So you better learn to rely on family. Second, as a black child, you have a right to power. And you have a right to do whatever is necessary to acquire it. And third, you should desire to see black people wielding power, but you have to have rules that go along with power. And rule number 1 is power is meant to benefit the black collective. And if you got some black folks who are off code, power is used to get them in line. And if they refuse to be gotten in line, then power is used to make sure that they are not a problem for the black collective. Power is useless if you're sitting on your hands while you got all this off-code behavior going on. You want to know why a lot of this crap's going on? You want to know why you got a Cassie Lemons and a Lee Daniels and you got the rest of these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools running around trying to undermine us at every turn? It's because of Van Jones or a Stacey Dash or the rest of these idiots. They know, or at least in the case of Stacey Dash, they thought that they could continue to act against black people's best interest and still be able to eat the next morning. They figured that there was no substantive black structure in place that could hold them accountable for acting against our interests. So the black bootlick, he acts the exact same as the rest of these anti-black racist groups. And it's because as far as they're concerned, there is no price to be paid because there is not a substantive structure that black people have put in place to charge a price. Black children need to understand they are going to require power. And once they get their hands on some power, a lot of these attacks are going to start getting blunted because, as I've always taught you, power is used as a shield long before it's used as a sword. But black children need to be taught that there are things that they need to be protected against. The white media tries to teach some sort of dual propaganda where, oh, we'll teach black children that the police are their friends. Yeah, but the police are not gunning down black children in the parks, and you don't have any of these white supremacists calling the police on white children in the park for the sake of getting them killed. You talk about that white woman in Idaho or Iowa or wherever. She decided that she was going to go to the park and violate the social distancing rules. You had the cops who had lined off the park with yellow tape to make it very clear, no, you're not supposed to be in here, not supposed to be using the playground equipment. We're staying off of the areas of common Congress. And what does this white woman do? She goes, to heck with that. That's for everybody else. That's not for me. And by the way, she was a plant. As I told you, she was a plant. This was all a political stunt. So what happened was the police came and they arrested her. Yeah, but they didn't run around shooting her kids. There were multiple complaints about this woman, multiple complaints to the police. But they understood, well, we only shoot black children. And yet you'll have black children who think that the cops are their friends. You'll have the white media putting out images of black children whose parents are silly enough to let them run around. Oh, I like to shake hands with the police, and oh, we're going to make nice with the cops, as if we're a bunch of white kids from the suburbs, understanding the police do not treat black children the way that they treat white kids from the suburbs. If you want to ensure that somebody never challenges a system of oppression, indoctrinate that child with the idea that the oppressor is their friend. You do that and they will never ever rise up against the system of oppression. So black children need to be taught that the white media's primary job is to get them to sit on their hands and allow the system of white supremacy to continue apace and to not get in the way of it. And, well, you're a part of this system of white supremacy. I mean, the American social order. Oh, it's not perfect, but you know, it is improved. Oh, it's better than it's been in the past. You need to be teaching these kids, no, it's not better than it's been in the past, and you're not part of this. The only integration that matters is the integration of power, and you do not have any power, and the white media's job is to get you to think that you do. Or rather, to get you not to act against the fact that you don't. Okay, you don't have any power, but you better not do anything about it. You can just sit back and see if these misleaders and puppets and pawns in government are going to be doing anything about that power situation. Meanwhile, you get to watch as the people from the dominant society, they're being catered to hand and foot. The destruction of white supremacy is going to be a multi-generational struggle, so we as a people require a multi-generational approach. That's where the children come in. Their mother's milk of black empowerment is supposed to be fed to them daily. They are supposed to have a healthy sense of contempt for the system of white supremacy that they live under. They are to understand that there are a number of people, a lot of people who are beneficiaries of black subjugation and oppression, and that is not okay. They are to understand that there are people who are benefiting from black people's pain and suffering, and that these beneficiaries of white supremacy, they are not your friend. Black children need to be taught that their skin happens to be not a curse at all. It is empowerment. It has inherent value in and of itself. That you do not need to get approval or the approbation or the friendship of anyone else. Power is not about friendship. I've always taught you friendship stops at the cash register. You want people to like you, just go ahead and say yes to anything. Let them walk all over you, say yes to that, agree to anything that they tell you, and everybody will like you. But the problem is, what'll also happen is you'll be abused, subjugated, done wrong with impunity. No, you don't want people to like you. You want people to respect you. And if you want people to respect you, you better start saying no. That's something that the white media is not going to teach black children. So black children need psychological armor that is meant to protect them against the lies that the insidious lies that the white media is going to try to indoctrinate them with. They're going to require psychological armor, and that armor is you teach them first and foremost. That dark skin that you wear, that happens to be valuable. There is something unique about you. The world's going to tell you that it's valueless, and that's the reason why is because they can't have it. Dr. Claude Anderson has said many times that we are an exceptional people. And that wasn't merely something he said as a means of helping us affect political policy. That was when he said that, that didn't just begin and end with the issue of reparations. That wasn't just a matter of undergirding a reparations claim. When he said that we are an exceptional people, he was giving us a basic truth. We are not part of some amalgamated post-racial human herd. We are certainly not like the white supremacists or their allies, and we don't want to be. It's suicidal to teach color blindness to black children when color is the very thing white supremacy has instituted to define its evil control of the world. White supremacy has used military control to put in place a racial hierarchy, and that hierarchy is based on color. It isn't based on class. So when you send black children out into the world and tell them, oh, don't see color, problem is that's the only thing the social order sees. When it deals with black people, especially black children, your skin color is the first and only thing that matters. And that will not change until you change it. Black children need to understand that the world has been turned on its freaking head. It's not just a little wrong, it is completely and thoroughly wrong and has been perverted beyond all recognition. And it is their mission to set it to rights, that they are in this world for a purpose, and that purpose is to reestablish the rule of justice. Dr. John Henry Clarke said, we as black people must step into the power arena of the world and start to deal. But before we call ourselves vying for power, we had better get it straight who that power is meant to benefit. The reason that Africa keeps handing its resources, its land, and its fate over to one group of foreign invaders after the next is because long, long ago, the African abandoned the idea that power is meant to benefit black people. The Africans abandoned that principle a long time ago. Part of this complete failure happens to be a historical bad habit that invaders and colonizers have been able to take ready advantage of. The African long ago decided that he would be only too willing to prioritize the well-being of strangers without first establishing to that stranger that he is merely a guest in the African's home, and that the guest's welcome can be rescinded at any moment. To let the stranger know you're here as a guest, but don't think you're going to be running anything. Make that very clear, and don't be bashful about it. You came here because apparently either you ran out of food somewhere else, or you didn't have anywhere else to go, and that being the case, you're not going to become a problem here. Only thing you should be looking for is whether or not you got something to eat tomorrow. You're not going to be running anything. You're not going to be administrating anything, and do not ask for anything. You came to our home. We didn't come to yours. And from the looks of things, wouldn't have found anything even if we had. The African has a right to rule the places where he lives. That is what Malcolm X defined as black nationalism. Control of the economics and the politics of the areas in which we live. That's what Malcolm said 50 years ago. He gave the most succinct and appropriate definition of black nationalism that's ever existed. You want to know what the black agenda is? That's what the hell it is. To control the economics and the politics of the areas in which we live. What are economics? Economics is the system by which resources are distributed. That means we control the resources starting with the land and the means of production. That means the factories, the places where things get produced. When you take raw materials and turn them into finished goods, that's how you create wealth. You literally create wealth like that. That's how it's done. Malcolm said it, all wealth is based on land. But you also got to control the means of production. And secondly, politics. Politics means the distribution of power in a given setting. Now, when you start thinking along those lines, that I am supposed to control the resources where I live so that I can eat the next day. And I'm also supposed to control the politics so that the resources are put to work for my benefit. Then what happens is you're going to start getting bolder about a whole lot of things when you have that kind of mentality. I'm supposed to be bossing up in here. I'm supposed to be calling the shots, and the shots are not just I'm running around trying to be the big man on campus. It's supposed to be a matter of there is a specific destiny that I am pursuing. I require resources and the control of those resources in order to do so, and I will have my power. And that starts with where you stand. Africa has become just a pitiful case study in how you abandon your duty to rule and you'll wind up being ruled over and eventually wind up being stamped out of existence. The African has failed time and again to require anything from those who have set their feet on African soil, and as a result, the Africans have become ready prey for anyone who washes up on their shores. The African has forgotten, well, at this point, he's become contemptuous of the idea of being empowered. Apparently, he thinks power is something that other people are supposed to wield, but not him. And then he wonders why it is that he's been the victim of everybody else's whim and caprice. At best, you got a few of them who apparently their highest aspiration is to play golf with their European colonizers or to try to be best pals with the racists coming in from China, no matter how many countless examples of blatant anti-black racism the Chinese are carrying out. This type of dysfunction is not merely the result of being miseducated by the white media. Is also a failure on the part of black people. A child's primary education is supposed to take place in the home. Yes, ordinarily the institutions of the society would be the ones responsible for teaching and reinforcing a value system that instructs the young as to their place in the world and how to preserve it. But the thing is, we live under white supremacy. And that being the case, we do not have institutions because we have not made it our priority to establish them. And you've had many black bootlicks who have been paid agents of the oppressor class who have come among us and said, we don't need any institutions. Why? We need to integrate into white supremacy's institutions. You know, the main institution that black people have been integrated into were the plantations and Massa's big house. Oh, we were fully integrated then. And abused morning, noon, and night. Men, women, and children weren't free, couldn't have a moment's peace. But apparently there are some people who apparently long for those days. Do you? So, lacking the formal institutions in the greater society itself, because of the fact that we have not built them, you start in the home, you start where you stand. And this is something that black people, apparently too many of us are desperate that we're going to try to get out of doing. We're going to try to find a way to make excuses and talk our way out of doing the hard work of establishing our institutions and defending them. You want to know why it is that black folks are terrified at the prospect of having to actually build something and then defend it? It's because they're still at this late date trying to be friends with the white supremacists at this late date. When you start talking about you got to defend what's yours, like, well, yeah, but what about these white supremacists that I'm trying to be friends with? Hey, I saw some Becky over there. She's got the clap, but I hear that she ought to be over it in a few weeks, and I'm hoping that maybe I can get some interracial sexual access. What? I'm supposed to be over here with just black people? That ain't good enough for me. There are a lot of black folks who are absolutely captured by that mentality. So when you start talking about protecting what black people have, only thing that they hear is ain't going to be no more interracial sexual access and no more of being some white supremacist pet Negro. That's all they hear. So of course that doesn't appeal to them. This is what we are attempting to put in place. That's why I said over a decade ago, what is the goal of the black media? It is to take control of the social discourse within the black community. Social discourse means the culture. Because a culture is supposed to honor and magnify the importance of those who are part of it. To instill in them a sense of value and purpose, and that wherever you go in this world, you should be respected. No one can claim that the sons and daughters of Africa have ever set their foot on foreign soil and then attempted to undermine, colonize, overthrow, enslave, rob, or marginalize those whose lands we've entered. On the contrary, we have only built them up and benefited them. We brought them things they didn't have and could never have made on their own. We have not tried to force anyone to speak our language or to adopt our ways. But these other groups who we've come among, not only have they decided that they would copy our ways, but a lot of them who never even met us, they imitated us and claimed that they had met us. They have imitated our ways of their own free will. And I think that's a large part of what it is that they resent about us. The only way that these white supremacists and other groups were able to get others to adopt their ways was by the sword or the gun. The African, on the other hand, was able to conquer these other people's cultures and supersede their cultures without firing a single shot, simply by virtue of the fact that we were there. That's the origin of this idea that they hate us because they ain't us. They're looking and going, man, how come we don't have that kind of appeal? And so what they instinctively do is, since they see something that they don't have and are incapable of actually getting, it's a matter of, well, we're going to say that there's something wrong with you, all the while they're imitating us morning, noon, and night. They imitate the trappings of black culture morning, noon, and night, but they say that there's something wrong with us. Well, perhaps there is, to the extent that we are not making our children aware of the world that they live in and properly preparing them for it. We don't prepare them physically, we do not prepare them with material resources, and we dang sure don't prepare them psychologically. Black parents do not teach their children to embrace and value being black. Now, this is where I'm going to have a bunch of people in my comment section claiming that they do. Stop it. Just stop it. You're not fooling anyone. This pathetic practice of denying our failures, this is something that the black baby boomers did, and the only thing that you're showing is that you're cut from the same cloth as them. If we as black people truly had all of these black parents who were indoctrinating their children with a sense of black empowerment, then we wouldn't have all of this epidemic of off-code behavior that we've been cursed with. The failure begins in the home, because that's the one place where black people should at least have enough sense to try to exercise control over. Most black parents, and this includes a large number of you listening, are trying to be part-time custodians of your kids. Or you're trying to parent by remote control. You're trying to parent as little as possible. The African shirked his responsibility at the continental level, and you have now shirked your responsibility at the individual level. Because you know as well as I do, there is no amount of white media, TV shows, movies, video games, or phony news propaganda that can undo the teachings of a dedicated black parent. You got a black parent who's made up his or her mind that their child must understand the world that they're in and understand that that child must have power so that that child can exercise that power to reinstitute justice. There is no amount of white media propaganda that's going to overcome that. But you got some black folks who want to outsource this basic parental duty. Even the black media is not supposed to be doing that for you. That's supposed to be what you're doing for yourself. If a black media never existed, that would still not absolve you of the responsibility to have to teach your children that they have a right to influence the world and a right to be free from any sort of oppression or degradation. They have a right to have power. They have a right to shape the world. In fact, they have a duty to shape the world. Every black person is to realize that they are not an island unto themselves. When it comes to dealings among other black people, be it our direct family members or the black collective, then you can start talking that friendship stuff. It does have its place in the black collective, though even friendship stops at the cash register. And that's because culture is completely reliant upon and largely shaped by resources. And a group of people who don't have resources, they're not going to have a culture or friends either. But beyond that, when it comes to dealings with those outside the black community, we must realize and act like we understand that we are part of a group. And groups don't have friends. Groups have interests. And dealings outside the Black collective must be seen from and participated in from that perspective. Now, you got some Negroes who are trying to act like they're a group of one, and what happens predictably is these other groups that you're trying to be a group of one with, they make it very clear to you, nah, we might tolerate your presence, but that's about the most you're going to get from us. And before long, they go to being a loyal lapdog because they know that's the best they're going to get. These other groups make it crystal clear that they're not going to do business with you to any extent. Oh, well, surely I can be one of you, right? Well, you might be the team mascot, though you're going to be a mascot that gets kicked around a lot, but that's going to be the best you can hope for. And you go making too much noise about that, well, guess who's going to be put out for the night or permanently? Too many Black people have taken up practicing codependency. And this is why the Zaddy worship and Becky fetishes are so out of control. You look at the oppressor class as being soulmates, and they look at you as being gutter sexual recreation at best. Black children must be taught to value interacting with other Black children in a constructive manner. That begins in the home. The white media will devalue melanin every chance it gets. Either it uses image training to associate Blackness with every undesirable trait imaginable, or it degrades Blackness into being, at best, a helper to white power. This is why the only representations of Black people the white media will allow is either the pathological criminal or the sidekick / best friend. This is meant to indoctrinate Black people, especially Black children, that if you're not trying to make yourself useful to some white person and carrying out their wishes, then you're a threat. You're one or the other. The white media goes out of their way to make it clear that Black men are not to be shown as administrators. They're not to be shown as the ones who are running things, and they certainly do not give orders to non-Black people. No, a Black man is not in charge of anything unless it's a drug operation. The white media doesn't show Black people interacting with one another for the sake of benefiting other Black people. They want to teach you that, oh, Black folks just can't get it together, and some of you have hid behind that lie. Oh, there are examples of Black people who do indeed manage to work for the good of the collective, but the problem is you got a lot of Black folks who are desperate not to be part of that. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah. They're turning around to the burning city because as far as they're concerned, the responsibilities of Black empowerment, well, that's too inconvenient. It's not desirable enough. The white media has come up with a number of templates, and it's deliberate templates that are meant to reinforce Black dysfunction. Black children watch these white media generated lies. The white media tells them that this is a colorblind society, so it's okay for you to be someone's sidekick. But as soon as the Black child decides that his white pals should follow his instructions, all of a sudden the society puts him in his place real quick. They show him ain't no colorblind anything. Well, what does colorblind mean under the white media? What colorblind means is the dominant society will not remind you that you're Black until you try to exercise power. That's what colorblind means. We'll go ahead and we're not going to call you a nigger to your face. And why? When we're in front of you, we'll tell you that we're all just people. That is, until you call yourself trying to call any shots. Then all of a sudden, hey, nigger, you Black people sure are uppity, you know. And all of a sudden they'll remind you, oh, we see what color you are. Black people are not shown or depicted as ever working together for a constructive enterprise. The only time the white media shows two or more Black people working together on anything, it's to do drugs or carry out some sort of criminal action. And predictably, the Black child grows up and enters the world with this dysfunctional view of themselves. So when it's time to build something, he doesn't even attempt to go to other Black people. Instead, he immediately runs to try to hitch his wagon to the star of the dominant society. Whoever the nearest white person is, that's who he's going to go running to. It never even occurs to him, you might want to cast down your buckets where you stand. Maybe the people around you are the ones who you need to be whipping into shape so you can change some of these things. And that brings us to another issue. Trying to build with other black people instead of making excuses for why you can't. Because when it comes to black folks, why we can be abused and we can be roadblocked and stymied and crippled 5 ways from Sunday by the white supremacists, and yet we will still try to be part of their operation. Oh, there's no amount of abuse that's too much for us when it comes to trying to be part of the dominant society's operation. We'll go ahead and put up with any amount of abuse from them. See, when it comes to dealing with the white supremacists, black people have infinite patience with them. Why, we'll see the white supremacists crush our dreams over and over again with their refusals to support anything that we try to do. Why, we'll even let them send us to prison, and we will still cling to that rotted corpse of some colorblind delusion. Meanwhile, when it comes to other black people, well, we've got absolutely no patience and no faith with them at all. Oh, we got infinite patience with the white supremacists, but other black people, nah, not even a microsecond. Oh, well, how about if we try to put some effort into building something? Yes, you're going to bump your head every once in a while, but why not put some effort behind that? Oh, that's too much. That take too long, too painful. I ain't doing that. You got these black people who have taken on the mentality of the dominant society, even if they're not honest enough with themselves to admit to it. Oh, these people will immediately claim that there's absolutely no black people that they can build with, though they're always very careful not to mention that they haven't even tried. Or they'll dismiss cooperating with black people with the flimsy, feeble excuse that it's simply too difficult for some reason or another. Now ask yourself this question: would there be a black media today if the thought leaders of the black media had taken that attitude? Oh yeah, you'll endure any amount of abuse from the white supremacists. Black folks will fight wars to try to force the white supremacists to accept us. Why, we'll go to your lunch counters. You can beat us up until we're bloody. You can firebomb us. You can murder us in the streets. Can I please go to your movie theater? Well, not until they kill about 10 or 20 more of you. Apparently, that's the price of admission to this movie theater. Why, there's no mountain that we won't climb. There's absolutely no river of glass that we won't crawl naked across. No level of degradation that we won't stoop to in order to win the favor of the bad guys. Why, we'll browbeat the white supremacists and we'll make these feeble pleas that they recognize our humanity if they'll just let us hang around. But the moment that you tell him that he should apply that same indomitable spirit to trying to get black people to toe the line, all of a sudden he tells you it would be too hard, it'd take too much effort, it ain't worth it. Some folks just never learn. White supremacy has no permanent plans for any black person. Other groups seem to recognize this fact. You got these people who come from these non-white countries but are seeking to try to find a comfortable place under white supremacy. When they get here, what they decide is, hey, there may not be anybody who looks like me here yet, but I'm going to establish an enclave here. I am the forward element of what's going to be this community here soon. Oh, sure, I'll be doing business with these other non-Asians or non-Hispanic folks until I get my weight up. And once I get my weight up, I'm going to be making sure that I'm smoothing the runway for the others who are going to be coming behind me. That's the mentality that they carry into it. They're not trying to figure out how to abandon their group. They're trying to figure out how to establish their group. They'll do as much business with the dominant society or even with black folks as they have to, and be very careful not to let black people, or in many cases the white supremacists, get control of what they're trying to build. But as soon as they're able, they start using their position to put their own people on. You got these people from the Middle East who own these gasoline stations. The most you're going to be is either you're going to be sweeping the floors or you're going to be working a cash register because he doesn't have enough in-laws or relatives who are willing to work for those wages to do so. But don't think that he's going to be handing the keys to the shop over to you unless he's telling you make sure you close up tonight. That's the closest to getting the keys you're ever going to have. This becomes a tad confusing for some black folks. because they're deliberately looking for excuses to hide behind. A lot of black people pretend not to understand what it is we mean by building an economy. When it's explained to them, they then try to hide behind, well, what if you can't find any black people to build with? I get amused at the half-wits who tried the stupid, feeble line of, well, if a company's got mostly black folks who work there, just 'cause it's got a white CEO and a white board and white administrators, that don't mean it ain't a black company. I mean, there's mostly black folks there. That makes it a black company, right? This is the epitome of desperate and stupid, the kind of mentality that tries something like that. And you would think that in this place, the house that Professor Truth built, you would think that in the confines of the black media, that you wouldn't have individuals trying that old, lame, feeble excuse, what if I can't find nobody to build with? You would think they would have better sense than to try that here. And yet there are a number of them who try it. And why is that? Well, it would make sense if this was World Star Hip Hop or Hood Clips or some other place on YouTube, but they tried that with the black media. Why would they try that here? It's because they're hearing a different message here. There are a lot of black people who are hell-bound and determined that they'll be damned before they take on the duties and responsibilities that power requires. Black empowerment, they have had a black media that has unapologetically spelled out exactly what the requirements of power are, and they have looked and decided, well, the rigors of power, that's requiring too much. I'm trying to sit back and just coast. I'm not trying to do it. Well, yeah, that's too much work, too much trouble. So they're trying to find a excuse that sounds good. Well, I'm sure if I find an excuse that'll sound good, well, that might fly with other people, but it's not going to fly here. That's what's going on here, and it's obvious what the hell it is that they're doing. There are a lot of black people who have decided that they're not going to build. They don't want to be part of black empowerment. They don't want to have to take on the adult responsibilities that power requires, and they're trying to find an excuse they can use that will get someone to say it's okay. They're trying to find some way to harangue and harass and to otherwise get some phony sympathy and say, well, I can't do it. And they want us to say, that's okay. You don't have to. Oh, you don't want to have to actually build? Well, somebody else will see to your survival. You don't have to see to it for yourself. That's okay. You get an exception. See, that's what one of the things the white supremacy also gave them. White supremacy will throw you some crumbs as long as you go ahead and give them some story, though the crumbs are being withdrawn these days. And now they're coming to the black enclave, and hopefully they can try the same thing here. Won't work. For those Negroes out there who are trying to find excuses instead of find power, let me tell you something. Black empowerment is not about to be throwing you any crumbs because you're not a dog. You're a man and you will be required to stand on your feet as such. And if you're one of these people still trying to find some excuse to hide behind, I'll tell you right now, Professor Black Truth, I'll see your stomach touch your backbone before I see you get any crumbs from me. You're not going to be playing this game of let me find an excuse. I'm looking for people who are out there finding ways to get things done, not the ones giving the same old shop-worn, time-honored bullcrap lies and excuses for why they can't. I don't respect can't. And you shouldn't either. And no, it is not okay for any black person to be disempowered. It's not okay for any black person to be oppressed. And it's not okay for any black person to be without or to try to find a way to say, well, here's the reason why I can't. It's not okay. And if you're playing the game of, well, if I can't find no black folks to build with, fine then. That's not a requirement. You got some Chinese nationals trying to get a foothold in Africa, and the Chinese government gives them some money with which to start an import company. 90% of the employees for that company are going to be black, but you better believe the 5 or 6 Chinese who run things, they're going to be the only non-blacks in the entire company, and they're fine with that. You want to know why? Because they know that that's not a black company. What defines whether a company is black or not? The same thing that defines every other business enterprise. The person or people who own it. You see those export companies that the Chinese are setting up, they'll have a 90% black workforce, and yet for some strange reason, we all understand those are not African companies. Those are not black companies. Why? Companies defined by who owns it. Now, we can quibble about whether it operates in black people's interests, but what we don't get to quibble about is what defines the company as being black owned or not. What defines it as a black company? That we don't get to argue about. That's why we don't waste time with these do-nothings. You can tell them to build with black people and they'll claim they can't find any black people. You tell them, okay, fine then, build your business with whomever you have there in front of you, be they as employees or customers or what have you, so long as you retain 100% control. And as soon as you give them that, that ought to put the excuses to an end. But even then, they claim not to know. Well, doesn't that mean it's not a black business anymore? So what you see is they're just trying to find excuses to hide behind. These are not legitimate questions. These happen to be backstabbers and backsliders who are making complaints and objections, but they're trying to give their objections in the form of questions. They're looking for an excuse not to do anything. And when you explain to them that you can do business with whomever you must, as long as you understand that whatever economic means you amass is to serve black people, they fall silent at that point. But it's not because they understand. They've always understood. The reason that they'll fall silent is because they can't think of another excuse. You've taken the excuses away. It's obvious where these objections come from. These are the Negroes who are terrified at the prospect of having to get off their duffs and produce for themselves. You never see the white supremacists or the Asian people who own these fast food restaurants or dollar stores asking where they're supposed to find Asians and white people to build with. They will have a mostly, if not completely, black workforce and customer base, and yet for some strange reason, that doesn't become an excuse for them, and yet the money that they generate never touches the very black community who made it possible in the first place. See, all these excuse-making Negroes, they pick that crap up from white supremacy. And as Neely Fuller said, the white supremacists like to play dumb, and black folks like to play dumb right along with them. Only this time you got these black folks trying that ploy with the black media, and we won't play along with it. We don't allow the white supremacists to act like they don't know what's going on, and we won't allow you to do so either. So these Negroes who are out here talking about how they can't find other black people to build with, they're not fooling anyone, and they're not going to take anyone anywhere. Is it easy to find on-code black people? No, but it's hardly impossible. Most black people are waiting to see who has a machine in place that they can follow. Why not yours? Black children need to be taught that their survival will depend entirely on whether or not they build. And please don't tell me you're already teaching black children this, because if you were, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. Black children need to be taught to take pride in being black. Blackness is not something to be avoided or run away from or ignored. But that's what too many of us have tried to do. The hand-picked Negroes who white supremacy cherry-picks to pretend to be our leaders, these actors, athletes, and celebrities, they get a little bit of money and then they try to become part of the dominant society. And they try to then justify this denial by repeating the same old platitudes about post-racial this and colorblind that, pious-sounding lies, because the very dominant society they're so eager to get close to does not practice any of that. But more than that, black empowerment must once again become our standard operating procedure. Too many of us are rebelling against this reality, and we are allowing our children to be mistaught to rebel against it as well, and that's not okay. You do not have the right to refuse to teach your children the reality of the world that they live in. But for those of you out there who have given yourselves some feel-good lie excuses as to why it's okay for you not to do your duty as black parents, let me tell you something. You can go ahead and decide that it's just too much trouble for you to have to daily hammer into your black children's minds the realities of the world and what they must do, the task before them. You don't have to teach your black children that. That's okay. Go ahead and create a void in their minds, and the white media will fill the void that you left with all kinds of colorblind kumbaya nonsense, and then your black child can go ahead and become a casualty of the white supremacist social order. But that doesn't fall on them, that falls on you. You better learn to stop investing in these white media sophisticated lies calling themselves entertainment. It's not entertainment at all. Because the reality is, it's not the white media that's doing the entertaining. It's you. You're the one who is doing the entertaining. And by consuming the white media's anti-black propaganda and allowing your children to do the same, what you're entertaining is genocide.